My biggest heart, I guess, for my grandchildren. I can't tell you how much time I spent with them, and they just love being with us. And this whole thing could have been stopped had CPS just simply told my daughter, your father had nothing to do with this. So I think it's a case of neglect here. Not neglect like in the case of Leiliana Wright, but why could they not have done it? There is no policy that forbids them from doing it. It's best practice. And I think if best practice destroys family, you need to reevaluate what the best practice is. Everybody told me, almost everybody told me when the trials were done, said just walk away from it, just be glad. And I kept on thinking about my grandchildren. And I kept on thinking, they're going to say to me someday, Grandpa, why did you fight for us? And I tried to think about, how would they feel? Because, all of a sudden their grandfather, whom they spent so many hours with, is now gone. Where did you go, dear Grandpa? You never said goodbye. You'd always come and visit. Where did you go and why? You said you'd never leave us. You said you'd always be here, but Grandpa, we haven't seen you now for more than a year. We were always so happy together, doing all the things we do. Don't you remember the fun we had? What if we reminded you? You always held and loved us. You never let us down. You loved and hugged and kissed us and carried us all around. Why did you leave us, Grandpa? Why did you go away? We miss you very much. Would you come visit us today? So if you know our Grandpa, please help and do your part. Please tell him that we love him with all our little hearts. Grandpa, we can't forget you. And so many times we cry. We don't know where you went, dear Grandpa, or why you never said goodbye. People's lives are touched. And it's not just the children, it's the parents, it's the grandparents. It's the brothers and the sisters. It's uncles and aunts. I heard a lot of the discussion too about Children's Protective Services, and I heard a lot of the discussion about money. And I'm not one who's going to say that Children's Protective Services is all bad or all good or anything like that. But I do think that there needs to be a level of respect toward the people, and that they can't hide behind policies that say it's best practices that we not tell anybody that it wasn't you. We'll let you take the rap. And Mia, the caseworker who was in Dallas, told me specifically, I don't really care about the family dynamics. We care about the kids. And I thought to myself, how can you say this? You've never met my grandkids. I was the one who gave so much time and money and love. And you love them more than I do? I want to hear this from you. Destroying families does not protect children. And I just think that when Children's Protective Services takes actions that destroys family, they ought to show the same zeal to rectify that as what they do is when they're trying to protect the child, supposedly. And Commissioner Whitman, I don't know if he said, okay. You've talked about transparency, and I believe you, I'm former military as well. I understand what you're saying, but there's an element of trust. When I've had this happen to my family, I would like to see the organization that helped to cause this say, you know what, we need to take steps to make it right. I had a few other things that I wanted to mention too. Anonymous phone calls. Somebody can place an anonymous phone call and make an allegation of child abuse. I don't know how many phone calls like that Children's Protective Services get, but I know that they happen. Are there any stats on that? And when we talk about caseload work, or the caseload, are some of these cases that people are looking at really frivolous things? I mean, why would anybody even look at me in this light? Intentionally false phone calls or intentionally false allegations, I would say make them criminal prosecution. When I was in the court, and I have the testimony right here, you can look at it, and it was proven. My daughter, her ex-boyfriend, my ex-wife, committed perjury on the stand. And you know what my attorney said? There's really nothing you can do about it because judges expect the witnesses to lie. And I went to a constable who was a friend, and he said, you really can't do anything because nothing bad happened to you. You didn't go in jail. I said, well, it's cost me $20,000 so far. Well, that's just part of the price. I would like to see an agency that has the integrity that they would stand up and take responsibility for their own actions and not let somebody else take their rap. In short, it's the whole thing about treat others the way you would like to be treated. I understand that there are very difficult cases. I am not addressing those cases. I know you guys have a lot of tough calls to make. But there is another part too, that you do help sometimes to destroy families. And I think that that needs to be an awareness that needs to be brought up. You've talked about kinship relations. I'm in the state of Texas. There are no such things as grandparents' rights. You know, I would love to be able to see my grandchildren. I don't want to be their parent. I was a really good grandparent. I have a niece. Her name is Kaylee. My brother and his first wife went through a divorce, and my brother turned his back on my niece. And my mother said she's not going to turn her back on her niece, or on my niece. She drove 100 miles or 130 miles, you know, once or twice a month to pick up her granddaughter, to bring her back up so that she could be with her Erie family. Fortunately, my brother's ex-wife said, please, have her be in your life. My niece right now is studying to become a doctor. And I attribute it largely to my mother's involvement. My mother and other members of my family had the ability to help out. There are people that just want grandparents in classrooms because grandparents provide something that a parent can't provide.
Thank you for your testimony. So is it your testimony that you would like to see a law, or you would like to see changes made to where the CPS it disclose who?
No, what I'm saying is this, because they have, first off, the anonymity clause. When I talked with Mia, who was a supervisor in Dallas, I said, you know, there's 7 billion people on the planet Earth. So you telling my daughter that I had nothing to do with this is going to compromise the anonymity of the other 7 billion people. I don't see that as being a big problem. And you know, if you have a child that actually needed to go into the hospital, and if your fear is that if I take my child into the hospital, Children's Protective Services might take my child away from me, what are you creating? You're creating a fear for the parent who wants to take care of the child to do so.
Members, are there any questions?
Yeah, if I may. Man, I'm sorry about your situation. Breaks my heart. I've got 3 grandkids.
Any grandparent would understand this.
You know, but as I was sitting here and I thought, well, you know, what rights do grandparents really have? And just as a matter of information, if you go to the Office of the Attorney General of Texas, there's a page there that's grandparents page. Now, it doesn't give exhaustive rights to grandparents. But it does acknowledge the fact that at least the state recognizes that grandparents play an important role in the life of their grandchildren. And it specifically says that, and I quote it.
Right.
And it contributes to the bonds that they develop over lifetime and development of the grandchild and the rest. It says this. And it says that grandparents, today, grandparents' rights generally apply to the custody of a grandchild and visitation privileges. Grandparents may file suit. I'm not suggesting that you do that. But it does say grandparents may file suit requesting custody if they believe it is in the child's best interest. Visitation statutes vary widely from state to state. In Texas, a court can authorize grandparent visitation of a grandchild if visitation is in the child's best interest. Now, I only say that to say or I only bring that up to say that although there are not exhaustive rights, and it seems like you're on your way to this being eventually put aside here, there is some opportunity here for you, should you decide to move forward on that, to file for at least visitation rights, demonstrating, as you've demonstrated here, that it very possibly could be in the best interest of the grandchildren. So I just wanted to encourage you with that, that it's just not a blanket, nothing you can do.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I have looked at the grandparents' rights on Texas.
Thank you.
And I know that other states actually have stronger legislation to help that. I believe Alabama just recently passed some legislation along those lines. Most of the people that I've talked with in Texas have basically said, you've got to let it go. But I think that the issue behind the issue here, to me, this was never an issue until April the 25th and April the 26th. And on April the 28th and April the 29th, it could have been resolved. I have paid a price. I could have been sitting in jail. I could have lost my job. That didn't happen, fortunately. But it could have stopped immediately had Children's Protective Services not had the best practice of not trying to get involved and letting somebody else take a rap. That's the big issue that I see here. But I thank you so much. I mean, I don't know how to pursue it, to be honest with you. And then I just recently got transferred back to Dallas for a year and a half. I was working out of Arkansas, as I mentioned, with my stepson. The whole house is equipped for him. We can't leave the house. We can't leave where he is because he's also, like I said, he's got 24-hour medical care, and the state of Texas pays for part of that. My wife and I sleep in a room above the garage, and we always joke about how we rent the house from Matthew. It's Matthew's house. For a year and a half, in order so that Matthew could be taken care of, I would leave Dallas I don't get up about 3 in the morning, drive up to Arkansas, get back about 6, 7 o'clock on Friday evenings. We could not move because of Matthew.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chairwoman King, you have a question as well?
Yeah, in all your testimony, I don't think I understood what you were accused of going to trial.
Well,
and you don't have to tell us, but you told us a lot of things. The other question I had was, it all surrounded by being involved in a hospitalization, correct?
that is correct.
So someone that saw this child evidently either called in and the presumption was that you called in. So I guess it sounds to me like CPS is being portrayed as the problem, but since it took place in the hospital, I just wonder if
Sure.
you know, perhaps, because ethically, you know, like as a nurse or really any citizen, whether it's in your oath or your, practice act, you are obligated to turn something in if you feel like you have evidence or see something that would endanger a child. So it seems like there's a big gap here. I was just curious about that.
Sure, I'd be glad to answer that question.
And the other thing, I would tell you that, we really appreciate you coming, and a lot of times, I'm not the chair, but is it okay if I say this? You don't know what I'm going to say.
But I know you're going to say something.
I feel that, this is an interim study, and we're trying to look at CPS, but I know a lot of people like to come because they feel they have no recourse and where can they go next. So that is part of what our job is too, to listen,
Right.
Even though it may not be definitively in sync with this interim study. So, I would also suggest to you, and I would say the same thing myself, as a regular citizen, that, it would be helpful perhaps for you to go further and to a deeper dive with CPS, just to perhaps you could make a difference for someone else if in fact you really truly believe that they were the culpable party and not the person that called it in or whatever that is. And I'm not trying to be an attorney.
No, absolutely.
I'm just missing a few of the points here. So I know that it's late and people are thinking, oh my goodness, will I ever speak? So I just was wondering about that because
Sure.
I would hate for you to walk out and think, was that a waste of your time, but I think there are other things that you could do that might be beneficial to other people.
Representative
Because
King,
of your experience.
you're absolutely right. I have seen the people that have been touched by these things. So when you said that am I trying to do something on behalf of others? Yes. I have a belief, and I mean, we've talked about people of faith here. I served as a missionary in the Middle East among Iraqi refugees for 5 years after I left the military. And there was one time that I preached a sermon on Joseph. And Joseph went through all these bad things at the end of his life. He sees his brothers, and his brothers are like, he's going to kill us. And Joseph says, am I in the place of God? I'm not in the place of God. You meant it as evil. And he didn't pretend that it was okay. He said you meant it as evil. But he said, but God used it for good. And I guess my view is to try to say, okay, this thing that happened here was evil. I don't even begin to know how to explain it. But how do you pay it forward so that other people don't go through the same thing? I was fortunate. It took me a year to pay off my attorney fees, but I had the ability within a year to pay them off. To me, this is not a political issue, it's not a race issue, it's a human issue. You know, and I'd like to be able to see some of those things change for other people down the road. Regarding what you said about the hospital, I will agree with you on that. Children's Hospital did call. You know, they were the ones that saw something. I even have no problem with that. But I feel this, if I'm going to say something, I'm not going to blame you.
Right.
I'm going to say, I said this. This is another matter of integrity. And these professional people that you're talking about, whether it's the medical profession, or whether it's the clergy, or whether it's the attorneys, they need to have that level of integrity. And when we're talking about people that have the ability to ruin people's lives inadvertently, not intentionally, but where is the integrity? Where is that we're going to make things right? And Commissioner, earlier you said that you know, you wanted to do what was right for the children. I have 2 grandchildren. To me, the right thing is to say, you know what? I am going to get on this. I may not be able to fix it, but I am going to attempt to make things right. Because that's what we're about, is doing the right things. And as a former Marine, you know that.
Mr. Moore, we're very, you know,
Yeah.
sympathetic towards your situation. But, you know, we also have to be mindful that some of the policies that are in place or practices are in place is to protect, to protect the children. Meaning that if CPS start disclosing who's making the calls or making the allegations, then people will stop calling, and then that would, you know, so.
How many false and anonymous calls that you have, and when you look at the anonymous calls, how many of them are legitimate? And I understand what you're saying about the need to protect the anonymity of people,
Right.
but this is a little bit different scenario.
And I understand, because you really do have a unique situation. I mean,
Right.
I don't think that's just the case with all of majority of the calls that come in. But thank you for your testimony. We really appreciate it.